Hello and welcome to the Tolkien Society. This is our monthly meeting and broadcast. It is April 20th, 2019, 1:01 p.m. Pacific Time. And we are at this time streaming live over youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. You can join us in the chat room and join the conversation live there if you wish by swinging by there. And I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves while I also check the sound on this. So make sure you speak. These microphones, you have to be pretty close. So have them right on the edge of the table. Speak to them fairly closely. I mean, they'll pick you up.
Is this on me?
Yeah, that's on you as well. So if you want to tilt it closer to you so you don't have to lean forward, feel free. It's very adjustable. That gooseneck's totally adjustable. And the way it is right now, it's not blocking your view. No. This way. God, it wants to come down.
It's fine. I think I'll just have it right here then. How about if I move my chair forward? That'd be better.
Well, whatever I just want you to be comfortable.
Okay.
So you do what's comfortable.
Okay. Sounds good.
We've got one really quiet cast member that's for, because we had her wearing leveler, but she was always fiddling with it and making noise and like, ah. So then we had her on one of these mics and she's just too quiet. So just trying to figure out how to get her to be heard.
Right.
All right. So,
and that's the camera we're looking at?
That's the camera you're looking at, correct. So go ahead and take turns introducing yourself quickly.
Yeah, my name is Zach. This is, my second time coming here. So, yeah.
Great.
And I'm Brian Husum, and I'm the secretary for the Tolkien Society here in Spokane.
Okay.
I'm Richard Baldwin. Just wandered in off the street and they let me stay.
Yeah, tilt that mic a little more towards yourself. Okay.
Testing.
Go ahead and tap it.
Shout out to Jeremiah if you're watching this right now.
Yeah, he is. A little harder than that.
Well, any harder and I think I'll dent it.
No.
With Mjolnir, you shall strike it.
What is...
I think that would be a little bit too much English.
We're getting some kind of noise. I don't know what it is. I'll have to troubleshoot in a minute. Anyway, so I'm sorry if the audio is off. I'll fiddle with it. We don't have our usual technician right now. So we get together every month and we read letters. We talk about the latest news with the Tolkien Society and others. And then we read excerpts of Tolkien's works or related works. Now, I know we didn't have a chance to write up our notes from last month. Does anybody remember last month what we covered in general? I know we read more of The Fall of Gondolin.
I know nothing.
And I think you guys, when I watched it, I didn't watch all of it, but I did partake in. I was able to jump on from home. So I recall you guys read letter 155. I don't know if you read maybe another one, possibly. But
I don't think so. I think
that's about where we were.
I think we read one letter and went on The Fall of Gondolin.
In Letters of Tolkien. There was a lot of discussion, I believe, of Tolkien's use of magic. I think that was one of the main topics you guys had.
Yeah, okay.
So that took up a lot of time.
Right, okay.
And I think you referred to, and this would be great to have available for people to look into, because I'd like to read it too, but a specific article in Other Minds.
Osric's article on magic in Middle-earth from one of the early Other Minds issues, one of the first 3 or 4 issues.
You said it was really great.
Yeah, he really broke it down in great detail.
Well, most of the buzz nowadays is Brian Sanderson's ideas on magic.
Not for Middle-earth. We're talking about Middle-earth magic.
I know, not from Middle-earth, but from...
Yeah, that's a specific group.
But it is true though that it is in terms of even I noticed my second daughter Mercy.
Yeah.
So when we talk about magic and fantasy, she's often referring to magic systems, and the reason why I think Sanderson is kind of getting attention is because he's not just got his own ways of using magic in his fantasy books, but he's specifically talking about how to create magic systems in fiction. So he's done a number of talks on this.
Teaching classes on it.
Well, because he teaches at BYU and such. So.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And my youngest son Drake's a big fan of his and has been in some of his workshops and such.
But I do think that...
and people like to know the rules that the magic is operating under to a certain extent.
Yeah, I do think though...
This generation at least.
The using the term magic system though is kind of making an assumption already. Not all magic is systematized,
right?
And so I would say Tolkien. I think you guys.
He did not He did not. I mean, that's the whole point.
Exactly.
It's hard to quantify and qualify as a specific system. Exactly, yeah. As he did in many areas, he did that intentionally.
Well, Lewis kind of talked about this as well with science fiction when this is of course a very different thing, but he said, the kind of science fiction that Lewis and some of his friends liked reading and writing was speculative and imaginative science fiction, not like he said you can imagine Mars because we've never been there, and so you could think of all sorts of things that could be there. Once you actually have sent probes that have visited and photographed Mars, he says, then it becomes another kind of science fiction. And so almost as if in maybe a related parallel way, you have whether fantasy or science fiction, Lewis and Tolkien both preferred perhaps this more what it's not all spelled out. Literally spelled out, right? It's not in the spell book.
Da-dum-dum.
Yeah, thank you.
So the issues...
Magic dictionary.
So Other Minds Magazine has, if you go to www.2.omzine.org/table-of-contents, or you just go to www.omzine.org, and go to table of contents. That's the older site. We're still moving stuff over to the new site, otherminds.net. There's a whole table of contents for all the issues, at least issues up through 15. And issue number 1 in 2007? I thought we did an issue in 2005. That might be the re-edited date. Magic in Middle-earth by Professor Chris Seaman was the first stab at it. Then later, in issue 7 in 2009, Thomas Borwinski did a little bit about a magical number. And then in issue 8, 2009, it was the whole issue was focused on the theme of magic in Middle-earth. Mm-hmm. So we had Neville Percy, a.k.a. Osric, did a sense of magic in general, then sense of magic for Merp, then Between Cana and Dogma by Daniel Vaca Flores, The Ways of Magic by Daniel Vaca Flores, a.k.a. Vaco. Antonio Simones did one on the Nine Nazgul, and then Padraig Timmons did one on the Age of Sauron, all related. And then, this keeps coming up, issue 10 in 2010, The Art of Magic, a Magic System for Middle-earth by Vaca Flores. Vaca, so he's tried to do that as a house system, but it's specific to role-playing gaming, right, where you do need to make some kind of system. Although Tor has avoided it.
Yeah, they managed.
They did. They've avoided having a system.
Which then has a very different
Tolkien-esque feel. Yeah.
You have some who are like,
yeah,
I wish it was more hard.
Yeah, right? But that's not what Tolkien gave us. He didn't give us that.
Sanderson talks about hard systems versus soft magic systems.
Yeah, he's very
wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
He's very invested in the hard systems.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly. Sanderson
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm very comfortable with One Ring. But let's ask a role player here.
Fellow.
I'm not a role player.
Fellow.
You are, but we're going to let Zach.
Yes. Good.
So, what are your thoughts on, since you weren't here last month, on Tolkien, magic in the stories, and then if you wanted to comment on role playing from your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, the magic in his stories, I don't know. I kind of like the fact that he doesn't have a system, because it's like there's a mystery there.
Yeah.
Magic has mystery.
Yeah.
And so when there's a system developed, now it's no longer a mystery, and for me, it kind of loses some of its charm,
mysticism
of
it. Yeah,
it's kind of it's just the interestingness of it. So there's like with Tolkien, he's just like there's so many different. I mean, there's the magic's so different compared to Elrond, even to Galadriel, that their power is different and their magic's different, and yeah, I like it that way.
Personal choice, really.
Yeah, so I kind of like it that way, because it's like when I'm reading, it's like I discover something, I see something I didn't expect.
Right.
So, yeah.
And as far as the issues, the last issue that covered magic, at least 1 through 15, is The Art of Magic: Over the Edge of the Wild, an Alternative Magic System for Tor by Vaca Flores for Tor. So I haven't read that one, but it'd be interesting to see. Hello, welcome. Now that's issues 1 through 15. We're actually up around issue.
I think we got a chair on the first.
We have 20 issues now. Yeah, you can sit at that end or this end, whichever you prefer.
Gary Larson.
Right or left? Mordor. Which way to Mordor?
But we're at issue 20 is on the otherminds.net website. And remember, Other Minds magazine is Tolkien scholarship and gaming, right? Because what happens is role-playing gaming triggers a lot of questions that lead to scholarly inquiry, because you're trying to figure out these applications and such that you might not have gone into detail of.
Those mountains in the distance look quest-worthy.
Yes.
And Hawk, shout out to Michael Martinez's blog, Zenite.
Yes.
.org, because I think as a game master, I find his scholarly, like, he seeks to intelligently say, what can we deduce from Tolkien's, legendarium that could answer some of those questions.
And his multiple books.
Right.
Visualizing Middle-earth, Understanding Middle-earth, Mind-Faring Middle-earth, etc.
But his blog does answer a lot of, like, random questions that people do have about.
In an entertaining style, too.
It is.
He's very entertaining
It
style.
only become relevant.
I love the one with the ranger and the elf. Yeah. Do you remember the one with the ranger and the elf?
Was it the one where they're sleeping under the stars?
Yes.
Yes.
They're looking up at the sky to like, what do you see? You look above, look up, and what do you see? Like, I see the sky and the stars of the night. And the elf goes, The ranger goes, figuring, well, that's not quite what he's looking for. Says, I see the vastness of this of what's beyond, and feel so small in the aspect of all of this, and realize how minuscule we are in all of our deeds, and blah blah blah. And the elf again goes, And then he makes one more stab at it, and the elf still just is non-committed. He's like, why? What do you see? And the elf responds, someone has stolen our tent.
The powers of observation, Sherlock Holmes.
The Rangers' focus wasn't close enough.
Yeah, it was Michael Martinez. It was great. Jeremiah says, I didn't listen last month, but I just opened my Kindle copy of Letters, and it opened to 156 by chance, if chance you call it. Ooh. And then he says, I agree that the vagueness of magic adds to its appeal. Galadriel's famous response to Sam about magic, her being confused or uncertain about the term, etc., always stuck with me. So any last words about that before we move on to whatever our new... Oh, you brought something...
Yeah, so I made a chart.
The trees. Oh, beautiful.
So one interesting... This actually...
We have an overhead camera, right? We put it by the dragon, I think. Let's see. Yeah, a little more... There, yeah, just about there. Just a smidge more.
Or is it upside down?
I think that's exactly right. I just need to angle it so you don't have to go quite as far.
Okay.
All right. So I can zoom in on that.
So one of the discussions from last month, I remember,
was the trees.
Is about the trees, and it's where you guys ended, where you paused in the Fall of Gondolin, because the question was in Gondolin, in the tower, the King's Tower. Or outside of it, Tolkien describes these images which Turgon had made, which were images of the two trees, and of course he uses different names for them. Anyway, so and the reference there, you guys ended up discussing it and kind of finishing the meeting with this. That were these images, okay, they're of the two trees in Valinor, obviously, but how were the trees of the how was the white tree of Gondor related? So you can see on here, and this is laid out also on the Tolkien wiki. What's the one? Tolkien Gateway.
Tolkien Gateway.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But that just shows that you have really the two trees, of course, get destroyed by Morgoth and Ungoliant. Yeah. Right. And then, but what's interesting is that Yavanna creates Galathilion, which is basically an identical tree to Telperion, the silver tree, except it does not give light. So there's no light, there's no power that way. But it's basically the same kind of tree. And so she creates this massive tree, and it then continues on in Valinor, in the city of Tirion, which is just as you come through the pass into Valinor, through the mountains, there's this city on a hill. So that's where that tree is. And then you have Celeborn.
Oh, it is upside
which
down.
is,
I'm sorry.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and flip her.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Is that good?
Yeah.
So here we have, so Celeborn is basically a seedling of that tree, which the elves planted on Tol Eressëa, which, remember, some of the elves chose to live outside of Valinor on the coast.
Yeah, that's outside the mountains of the Undying Lands.
Right. So Tol Eressëa is like that island there. And so they've got this little elfish, kind of fringe there, and they have the civilization kind of spills over there. And that's important because that's actually a place where on some days from Numenor, from the western point of Numenor, they could see, or there's some kind of, at certain days they could see Tol Eressëa through, I'm sure it was more than physical sight. Mm-hmm. But Celeborn was the tree, which means Silvertall, by the way. Which is
Silvertall?
Silvertall, which is why Celeborn, Galadriel's
husband is named
that too.
Okay.
A little confusion. So Celeborn, the tree, not the dude, ends up being planted there.
Dude.
And it's still living. So we're talking about two ancient but still living trees.
Wow.
And it's a seedling of Celeborn, which is then given to the men and women of Numenor, again, as a sign, a gesture, soon into the Second Age, of the friendship between elves and of these men, the faithful, the Dane, I can't remember. But so you have Nimloth of Numenor, of course. Not to get off too much on the role playing piece, but so you did a module on the fall of Numenor, and part of that was that
and then afterwards
Sauron,
too.
yeah, so Sauron ends up
disembodied.
He keeps to before that happens. He ends up seeking to corrupt the Numenorians, who are already kind of going away from the elvish focus, and they're trying to, as it were, kind of try to become longer lived and et cetera, et cetera. So he gets them to start worshiping Morgoth, and he actually has Nimloth chopped down. But before it's chopped down, Isildur steals a fruit from the tree. Sauron actually uses the wood of the tree to burn on the altar in worship of Morgoth.
Yeah, in the Morgothian
right, because the tree
temples,
is a symbol of the two trees, it's a symbol of the light, it's a symbol of Iluvatar and all that's good.
Right.
So this fruit from Nimloth is then brought across with Isildur and Elendil to Middle-earth, and then that becomes the first white tree, which endures for only 100 years because it's planted in Minas Ithil.
Which gets taken over.
Which gets taken over, becomes Minas Morgul.
Right. Minas Morgul.
But again, Isildur is able to take a fruit from that tree and plant a seedling in Minas Anor, Tower of the Sun, which then also becomes Minas Tirith later on, same city. So that you have second white tree. I can't remember why that dies, but then the third tree of Gondor is the one which is there
described in the Lord of the Rings.
Yes, described in Lord of the Rings, and Pippin, isn't it? Pippin, who's there, he sees the tree.
Oh, right, yeah, Pippin was in Minas Tirith, yeah.
Right, as Gandalf brings him in, he says, Gandalf, that's the tree I saw in my, when he touched the Palantir, the dead tree. But of course, the fourth tree is revealed after.
It's the one that Aragorn finds.
That's right. Gandalf and Aragorn go up above the city, and they see on the slopes of Mandolin this small tree that had been planted 7 years before, or whatever. So that's a little.
Excellent. You did some good research there.
Yeah. So the images, I did a little research, and it seems that the images in Gondolin are non-living. They're silver and gold representations of the two trees, not living trees themselves.
Okay. Well, that's good to know for our moot in September. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got to do a lot of research. I was going to show, because you mentioned it, the fall of Numenor depictions from a couple of different artists from the Other Minds magazine. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. It was.
Put it on this screen.
Yeah, once I get it working over here, I can slide it on over there.
Assuming.
So so our online viewers and listeners, Jeremiah and others, if you have, I don't know if you have a copy of Fall of Gondolin, but we'll be picking that up in a little while. So we'll get that, and also maybe the next letter of Tolkien. I'd really like to see if we can actually tackle Fall of Gondolin before the letter. Great. Just because that way we get through the. It's getting to a very exciting section here.
Okay. What is that?
And then also, while Hawk's looking that up, just a brief thing I can mention that's new. So on the Tolkien Society website, we're a smile of the UK Tolkien Society, and Michael Flowers, who you've actually heard in person, is I think you've got it up now.
I don't have it up on the stream yet, so you guys can see it. But what's it say?
Does it make Adobe Acrobat my default
application?
Never.
Never.
This. So you want me to go on talking, or are you?
Yeah, keep going, please.
Okay. So anyway, just really briefly, so Tolkien TV documentary to be broadcast in Britain. This was back on the 14th of April. Sky Arts, and it's basically called documentary exploring the surprising personality of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings writer, the birth of his epic tales and their huge success worldwide. Preview by David Brown for Radio Times. Those who wend their way to Middle-earth often find an inviting home there, be they the hippies who embrace Tolkien's books, the film fans who love the epic scale of the movies, or those like me who first discovered The Lord of the Rings through the atmospheric Radio 4 adaptation starring Michael Horton and Ian Holm, who was Frodo in the radio version.
Yep.
And of course later on was Bilbo on screen.
Yep.
So this is from Radio Times. So as Game of Thrones begins its final series, here's a timely reminder that George R.R. Martin doesn't quite have the monopoly on fantasy worlds. Though academics do wonder whether the success of Tolkien's stories means that their literary merits have been lost on that journey from page to screen. Radio Times, 13th to 19th of April, 2019. Anyway, so there's, have a look if you want at the Tolkien Society blog, their news. They put something on there about once or twice a month. And Michael Flowers did a fantastic job about actually locating the glade where Edith Tolkien danced.
Oh, that inspired him for that whole scene.
Luthien, yeah.
Oh wow, that's so awesome.
Yeah, that was a really cool presentation.
That whole story, just because the reality link and their tombstones and everything, is just gets me every time. I'm a hopeless romantic.
May 10th.
Do you say? Oh, is that when the movie's out?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
What?
For
remind us.
The biography for Tolkien.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yes.
Is that U.S. release?
Yes, I believe that's U.S. release. UK release is a couple weeks earlier.
Right. So Jeremiah, you will have to give us the lowdown on the scoop, and go see the Tolkien biopic movie over there and tell us what you think about it.
Biopic.
That's another word for biography. It's a film.
It's focusing on.
Well, bi would be two.
Bio.
Opic would be.
Well,
so
in this case, it's bio.
You could interpret that as stereo.
Yeah, in this case, it's bio.
Sorry.
So yeah, that's the module he mentioned.
So is Jeremiah seeing this or not?
Yeah, no, that's being streamed.
Okay, so what do you guys think about this illustration? Because I see some interesting, very Tolkien-esque kind of.
Yeah, there's two versions. There was this one on one end and the
Mountain.
Doesn't it look like Lonely Mountain?
Yes, it does.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, but and again, it's an artist rendering, and then you see the armada heading off. That's what the yellow is.
A little less
That's the
realistic.
huge armada. Yeah, it's much more representational.
Take that, Troy.
And the bolt of lightning
versus I can.
I know. But
see the eagles.
The island kind of reminds me of a starfish.
Yeah, it's symbolic.
Or the Japanese sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one artist's interpretation, because I asked a couple of artists to do, and then this is another one. There were 4 or 5. These were the 2 that were passable.
What was his name? Sauron.
This is when Sauron was up there on the temple defying the lightning strikes as they were striking the temples.
Anatar,
giver of gifts still, yeah. Well, no. That was before. Yeah, no, this is after he was imprisoned by Ar-Pharazôn.
Right.
But then he slowly corrupted Ar-Pharazôn and then ran things, basically. Yeah, no, he no longer was Anatar by then. And this is shortly before his form was destroyed, his fair form, that he can never take again. It was his Anatar fair form.
Sauron defies the wrath of the West.
Yeah, and you can see the eagles in there in the clouds, and this is a little bit more of a...
stylistic.
Yeah, this was, I think, a Spanish artist. This was very much her style.
Yep.
Kind of a Michael Moorcock style, I think.
And also very neoclassical.
Yeah.
If you look at the way that he's dressed in the buildings in the background.
The building design is,
Yeah. Jeremiah says, I do. I don't know what he's saying I do to.
I will go attend.
If the Tolkien film doesn't include the scene of Tolkien stealing a bus in Oxford, I'll be disappointed. Already concerned about the lack of epic wartime mustache in the trailer.
Well...
The mountain in the first image is very reminiscent of Tolkien's mountains. The second image somehow seems very Greek.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think it's the clothing he's wearing. Mostly.
Yep.
So that's those.
I also wonder.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's not.
All right, let me switch back. And I do have a copy of Fall of Gondolin. Good. He can follow along when we go through the reading of that then. Wonderful.
Anybody else have any Tolkien-related news?
Yes. What would you guys like to discuss? What topics would you like to cover, Chris?
Nothing, no update other than Peter Jackson completely denying any involvement in that new
Fingers crossed that that's the
Tolkien
truth.
series.
I hope that is the truth.
During the whole,
Hold him back! Hold him back! Don't let him.
Was he testifying Congress that he wouldn't be involved?
pretty sure
That doesn't mean anything.
One would think he's more truthful than some CEOs that shall not be named.
Oh, yes, possibly. Better is it the devil you know than the devil you don't know?
Yeah.
Well, at least he wasn't putting in casino machines with Lord of the Ring, Middle Earth. Remember that whole thing? That was the kickoff for the lawsuit of Tolkien. Was it Enterprises or Estate?
I don't know where you're
This
going.
was a couple months ago where, well, actually, this was last year.
Well, Star Wars did it. They did a new Star Wars first-person shooter that was based on basically loot boxes, or it was a form of gambling, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big controversy that blew up on that.
You're right, but this was based
But that was industry-wide.
Mm-hmm.
So
I believe it.
somebody might have been trying to make a Middle Earth and leverage in the loot boxes.
Anyway, everything's changed in the legal side of things.
Do you feel it in the air? Can you hear it in the
It's the
waters?
smell of green. But we're not
I
talking
thought it
about
was the
grass.
smell of greed.
Yes.
Yeah, especially on
Dollars
April.
Well, small side note. We were in DC for spring break.
We're having streaming congestion.
And we happened to be walking by the Bureau of Engraving, and my wife has to say, "You smell that? That's the sound. That's the smell of money being made." Quite literally.
We were having a little bit of a streaming issue, it looks like. It's saying it's having issues buffering. Jeremiah says, yes, the clothing. And then he also says, Peter Jackson denying involvement would certainly give me hope. It might not be a complete car wreck.
Right.
Just a
Well,
correct, not a train
and
wreck.
that it's the second age will help.
Yeah.
Yes. Even though
Because
on their
things
Twitter-
are often denied.
I know.
And still, yeah.
But it's
Keep it secret. Keep it safe.
Yes, it's as safe as a secret. I feel like if they don't set it in the second age, I'm really going to be disappointed in how.
Yeah, now that they've set,
No,
yeah,
it's
that would
kind of
be,
been
that whole map
confirmed.
thing.
because that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Welcome to the second age. I don't know. Is that
Which
big?
means we can finally have a whole bunch of second age content, maybe.
Woohoo!
About
Yeah.
It was
bloody
actually
time,
set
which I've
to-
been creating.
It was actually set
for
in the
years.
first age, the third age, but the whole season is a flashback to the second age.
Yeah, there you go. Sure, that's how we'll get around this.
Yeah.
But
Why
there's
are we
plenty of
having-
content.
Connectivity issues. Darn it. We are recording, so we'll upload the better recorded version of this to the site, to the page, to the channel after, so that if it's glitching on you, you'll get the better version. So, because it's kind of coming and going, I don't know why.
Well, as soon as it gets
Reset the
better,
network.
then
Yeah,
we should.
it's better
read,
now.
Then we should read. Oh, okay.
Okay, so you want to? Was there anything you wanted to discuss as far as specific topic?
No, I'm ready for Gondolin.
Richard, you had something you wanted to talk about before we go into it.
Yeah,
Something that starts with a G.
Are we
It's not
there yet?
Gondolin.
it's not really related
Yes.
to Tolkien, but I've
But
written a
you're-
short
you're
story.
proud of it,
that's
yeah,
been
here,
published in
hand that
an
down to
anthology,
him.
and I got my physical
Yeah.
copy of it.
Hold that up to the camera.
Which camera?
The one on the TV.
That's
look. Looky whose name is there.
So it's
King
it's not
Richard. Oh.
it's not Gondolin, but it is a gazebo. It's mentioned in the story, right?
yeah. Some people have had issues with that.
Running joke.
Jeremiah says, I would really like to see the TV series distance itself from the established movies as much as possible, start from the ground up. Hear, hear.
Original.
How about get back to the Tolkien roots rather than the Jackson roots?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Tolkien moot.
Yeah, it
That'd
really
be a
does
good
get back
start.
to
Start with our Tolkien moot. We'll help you.
yeah.
So yeah,
Well, let's dive into his works.
All right. Do you want to do letters first or
I
Gondolin?
prefer Gondolin, and then we can kind of stop at a certain set time and transfer over. So follow Gondolin, I think is a good idea.
Yes, I had a complete brain fart and forgot my copy, but that's okay.
Well, we can pass it around.
Yes.
Sure. And I've got a Kindle version.
Oh, somebody undid my.
I know where we
I
are.
had it. I had it marked, and somebody undid it.
55-ish.
Yeah, 55, 56. It's on the page where it says, "Then Turgon, king of Gondolin, robed in white."
Okay.
What page?
Want me to pick it up from there? That is 55.
Okay.
I'll
Go
start
ahead.
here, and then we'll pass it around.
Sure thing. Sure.
And Jeremiah says, "Congratulations, Richard!" Exclamation mark.
Oh, thank you.
Then Turgon, king of Gondolin, robed in white with a belt of gold, and a coronet of garnets was upon his head, stood before his doors, and spoke from the head of the white stairs that led thereto. "Welcome, O man of the land of shadows, lo! Thy coming was set in our books of wisdom, and it has been written that there would come to pass many great things in the homes of the Gondolthrim, whenso thou faredst hither." Then spoke Tuor, and Ulmor set power in his heart and majesty in his voice. "Behold, O father of the city of stone, I am bidden by him who maketh deep music in the abyss, and who knoweth the mind of elves and men, to say unto thee that the days of release draw nigh. There have come to the ears of Ulmo whispers of your dwelling, and your hill of vigilance against the evil of Melko. And he is glad, but his heart is wroth, and the hearts of the Valar are angered, who sit in the mountains of Valinor, and look upon the world from the peak of Taniquetil, seeing the sorrow of the thraldom of the Nodoli, and the wanderings of men. For Melko ringeth them in the land of shadows beyond the hills of iron. Therefore have I been brought by a secret way to bid you number your hosts and prepare for battle, for the time is ripe." Then spoke Turgon, "That will I not do. Though it be the words of Ulmo and all the Valar, I will not adventure this my people against the terror of the orcs, nor imperil my city against the fire of Melko." Then spoke Tuor, "Nay, if thou dost not now dare greatly, then will the orcs dwell forever and possess in the end most of the mountains of the earth, and cease not to trouble both elves and men, even though by other means the Valar contrive hereafter to release the Nodoli. But if thou trust now to the Valar, though terrible the encounter, then shall the orcs fall, and Melko's power be minished to a little thing." But Turgon said that he was king of Gondolin, and no will should force him against his counsel to imperil the dear labor of long ages gone. But Tuor said, for thus was the bidden by Ulmo, who had fared the reluctance of Turgon, "Then am I bidden to say that the men of Gondolthrim repair swiftly and secretly down the river Sirion to the sea, and there build them boats and go seek back to Valinor. Lo, the paths thereto are forgotten, and the highways faded from the world, and the seas and mountains are about it. Yet still dwell there the elves on the hills of Kor, and the gods sit in Valinor, though their mirth is minished for sorrow and fear of Melko, and they hide their land and weave about it inaccessible magic that no evil come to its shores. Yet still might thy messengers win there, and turn their hearts that they rise in wrath, and smite Melko, and destroy the hells of iron that he has wrought beneath the mountains of darkness." Then said Turgon, "Every year at the lifting of winter have messengers repaired swiftly, and by stealth down the river that is called Sirion to the coast of the great sea. And there builded them boats whereto have swans and gulls been harnessed, or the strong wings of the wind, and these have sought back beyond the moon and sun to Valinor. But the paths thereto are forgotten, and the highways faded from the world, and the seas and mountains are about it, and they that sit within in mirth reck little of the dread of Melko or the sorrow of the world, but hide their land and weave about it in inaccessible magic, that no tidings of evil come ever to their ears. Nay, enough of my people have for years untold gone out to the wide waters never to return. but have perished in the deep places, or wander now, lost in the shadows that have no paths. And at the coming of next year, no more shall fare to the sea, but rather will we trust to ourselves and our city for the warding off of Melko. And there too have the Valar been of scant help aforetime. I hear from then Tuor's heart was heavy.
Then Tuor's heart was heavy, and Varanwe wept. And Tuor sat by the great fountain of the king, and its splashing recalled the music of the waves. And his soul was troubled by the conches of Ulmo, and he would return down the waters of Sirion to the sea. But Turgon, who knew that Tuor, mortal as he was, had the favor of the Valar, marking his stout glance and the power of his voice, sent to him and bade him dwell in Gondolin and be in his favor, and abide each in the royal halls if he would. Then Tuor, for he was weary, and that place was fair, said yea, and hence, and there was much rejoicing, and hence cometh the abiding of Tuor in Gondolin. Of all Tuor's deeds among the Gondolithim, the tales tell not, but it is said that many a time would he have stolen thence, growing weary of the concourses of folk, and thinking of empty forest and fell, or hearing afar the sea music of Ulmo. Had not his heart been filled with the love for a woman of the Gondolithim, and she was the daughter of the king.
Aha.
Now Tuor learnt many things in those realms taught by Varanwe, whom he loved, and who loved him exceedingly greatly in return. Or else he was instructed by the skilled men of the city and the wise men of the king. Wherefore he became a man far mightier than aforetime, and wisdom was in his counsel, and many things became clear to him that were unclear before, and many things known that are still unknown to mortal men. There he had heard concerning that city of Gondolin, and how unstaying labor through the ages of years had not sufficed to its building and adornment, whereat folk travailed yet. Of the delving of the hidden tunnel he heard, which the folk named the Way of Escape, and how there had been divided counsels in the matter, yet pity for the enthralled Nodoli had prevailed in the end to its making. Of the guard without ceasing he was told that was held there in arms, and likewise at certain low places in encircling mountains, and how watchers dwelt ever vigilant on the highest peaks of the range, beside builded beacons ready for the fire, for never did that folk cease to look for an onslaught of the orcs, did their stronghold become known. Okay.
Yeah, why don't you just go, Brian?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, however, was the guard of the hills maintained rather by custom than necessity, for the Gondolithim had long ago, with unimagined toil, leveled and cleared and delved all that plain about Amon Guarath, so that scarce gnome or bird or beast or snake could approach, but was espied from many leagues off. For among the Gondolithim were many whose eyes were keener than the very hawks of Manwe, Sulimo, lord of gods and elves, who dwells upon Taniqueto. And for this reason did they call that vale Tumladin, or the Valley of Smoothness. Now this great work was finished to their mind, and folk were the busier about the quarrying of metals, and the forging of all manner of swords and axes, spears and bills, and the fashioning of coats of mail, byrnies and hauberks, greaves and vambraces, helms and shields. Now it was said to Tuor that already the whole folk of Gondolin, shooting with bows without stay day or night, might not expend their hoarded arrows in many years, and that yearly their fear of the orcs grew the less for this. There learnt Tuor of building with stone, of masonry, and the hewing of rock and marble, crafts of weaving and spinning, broidery and painting, did he fathom and cunning in metals. Musics most delicate he there heard, and in these were they who dwelt in the southern city the most deeply skilled, for there played a profusion of murmuring founts and springs. Many of these subtleties Tuor mastered and learned to entwine with his songs, to the wonder and heart's joy of all who heard. Strange stories of the sun and moon and stars, of the manner of the earth and its elements, and of the depths of heaven were told to him, and the secret characters of the elves he learnt, and their speeches in old tongues, and heard tell of Ilúvatar, the Lord for always, who dwelleth beyond the world, of the great music of the Ainur about Ilúvatar's feet in the uttermost deeps of time, whence came the making of the world and the manner of it, and all therein and their governance. Now for his skill and his great mastery over all lore and craft whatsoever, and his great courage of heart and body, did Tuor become a comfort and stay to the king, who had no son, and he was beloved by the folk of Gondolin. Upon a time the king caused his most cunning artificers to fashion a suit of armor for Tuor as a great gift, and it was made of gnome steel overlaid with silver, but his helm was adorned with a device of metals and jewels like to two swan wings, one on either side, and the swan's wing was wrought on his shield. But he carried an axe rather than a sword, and this in the speech of the Gondithlim he named Dramborleg, for its buffet stunned and its edge clove all armor.
A house was built for him upon the southern walls, for he loved the free airs and liked not the close neighborhood of the other dwellings. There it was his delight often to stand on the battlements at dawn, and folk rejoiced to see the new light catch the wings of his helm. And many murmured that would fain have backed him into battle with the orcs, seeing that the speeches of those two, Tuor and Torgon, before the palace were known to many. But the matter went not further for reverence of Torgon, because at this time in Tuor's heart the thought of the words of Ulmo seemed to have grown dim and far off. Now came days when Tuor dwelt among the Gondolithim many years. Long had he known and cherished a love of the king's daughter, and now it was his heart full of that love. Great love, too, had Iridil for Tuor, and the strands for fate were woven with his, even from that day when first she gazed upon him from a high window as he stood, a wayworn supplicant, before the palace of the king. Little cause had Torgon to withstand their love, for he saw in Tuor a kinsman of comfort.
Or eat your heart out.
My mic seems to be working now.
With the hammer.
Yeah.
Now the sign of Meglin was a sable mole, and he was great among quarrymen and a chief of the delvers after Or. Many of these belonged to his house. Less fair was he than most of this goodly folk, swart, and of none too kindly mood, so that he won small love, and whispers there were that he had orc's blood in his veins. But I know not how this could be true. Now he had bid often with the king for the hand of Idril, yet Turgon, finding her very loath, had as often said nay. For him Meglin's suit was caused as much by the desire of standing in high power beside the royal throne as by love of that fair maid. Fair indeed was she, and brave thereto, and the people called her Idril of the Silver Feet, in that she went ever barefoot and bareheaded. King's daughter she was, save only at pomps of the Ainur, and Meglin gnawed his anger, seeing Tuor thrust him out. In these days came to pass the fulfillment of the time of the desire of the Valar, and the hope of the Eldalie, for in great love Idril bore to Tuor a son, and he was called Earendel.
Yeah!
Now there are many interpretations, both among elves and men, but belike it was a name wrought of some secret tongue among the Gondolthlim, and that had perished with them from the dwellings of the earth. Now this babe was of greatest beauty. His skin was of a shining white, and his eyes of a blue surpassing that of the sky in the southern lands, bluer than the sapphires of the raiment of Manwë. And the envy of Meglin was deep at his birth, but the joy of Turgon and all the people very great indeed. Behold now, many years have gone since Tuor was lost amid the foothills and deserted by those Nodoli. Yet many years too have gone since to Melko's ears came first those strange tidings. Faint were they, and various in form, of a man wandering amid the dales of the waters of Sirion. Now Melko was not much afraid of the race of men in those days of his great power, and for this reason did Ulmo work through one of this kindred for the better deceiving of Melko, seeing that no Valar, and scarce any of the Eldar or Nodoli, might stir unmarked of his vigilance. Yet none the less foreboding smote that ill heart at the tidings, and he got together a mighty army of spies. Sons of the orcs were there, with eyes of yellow and green like cats, that could pierce all glooms and see through mist or fog or night. Snakes that could go everywhither and search all crannies or the deepest pits of the highest peaks, listen to every whisper that ran in the grass or echoed in the hills. Wolves there were, and ravening dogs, and great weasels, full of the thirst of blood, whose nostrils could take scent moons old through running water, or whose eyes find among single footsteps that had passed a lifetime since. Owls came, and falcons whose keen glances might descry by day or night the fluttering of small birds in all the woods of the world, and the movement of every mouse or vole or rat that crept or dwelt throughout the earth. All these he summoned to his hall of iron, and they came in multitudes. Thence he sent them over the earth to seek this man who had escaped from the land of shadows, but yet far more curiously and more intently to search out the dwelling of the Nodoli that had escaped his thraldom. For these his heart burnt to destroy or to enslave.
That's very interesting.
Now when Tuor dwelt in happiness, and in great increase of knowledge and might in Gondolin, these creatures through the years untiring nosed among the stones and rocks, hunted the forests and the heaths, espied the airs and lofty places, tracked all the paths about the dales and plains, and neither let nor stayed. Okay. From this hunt they brought a wealth of tidings to Melko. Indeed, among many hidden things that they dragged to light, they discovered that way of escape, whereby Tuor and Veronwe entered aforetime. Nor had they done so save by constraining some of the less stout of the Noldoli with dire threats of torment to join in the great ransacking. For because of the magic about that gate, no folk of Melko, unaided by the gnomes, could come to it. Yet now they had pried of late far into its tunnels, and captured within many of the Nodoli, creeping there to flee from thraldom. They had scaled too the encircling hills at certain places and gazed upon the beauty of the city of Gondolin and the strength of Amon-Gwareth from afar, but into the plain they could not win for the vigilance of its guardians and the difficulty of those mountains. Indeed, the Gondolithim were mighty archers, and bows they made of a marvel of power. Therewith they might shoot an arrow into heaven 7 times as far as the best bowmen among men shoot at a mark upon the ground, and they would have suffered no falcon to hover long over the plain, or snake to crawl therein. For they liked not creatures of blood, broodlings of Melko. Now, in those days was Arundel 1 year old, when these ill tidings came to the city of spies of Melko, and how they encompassed the vale of Tumaldin around. Then Turgon's heart was saddened, remembering the words of Tuor in past years before the palace doors. And he caused the watch and ward to be thrice strengthened at all points, and engines of war to be devised by his artificers and set upon the hill. Poisonous fires and hot liquids, arrows and great rocks, was he prepared to shoot down on any who would assail those gleaming walls. And then he abode as well as content might be. But Tuor's heart was heavier than the king's. For now the words of Ulmo came to his mind, and their purport and gravity he understood more deeply than of old. Nor did he find any great comfort in Idril, for her heart boded more darkly even than his own. Known that Idril had a great power of piercing with her thought the darkness of the hearts of elves and men, and the glooms of the future thereto. Further, even than is the common power of the kindreds of the Eldaliae. Therefore she spoke thus on a day to Tuor. Know, my husband, that my heart misgives me for the doubt of Meglin. I fear that he will bring an ill on this fair realm, though by no means may I see how or when. Yet I dread lest all that he knows of our doings and preparations become in some manner known to the foe, so that he devise a new means of whelming us, against which we have thought of no defense. Lo, I dreamed on a night that Meglin builded a furnace, and coming at us unawares, flung therein Arundel, our babe, and would after thrust in thee and me, but that for sorrow at the death of our fair child I would not resist.
Wow. Let's stop for a moment and,
yes.
And discuss so far. So we've taken it from the meeting of Tuor and King Turgon up to the point now where clearly things are starting to get closer and closer to a time when they will be discovered or attacked or whatever. And then so we have these premonitions. Did you guys have any comments on the descriptions of Gondolin, or the comments on the devices of Morgoth and the creatures he employs, or any comments on what we read so far?
Well, they mentioned making bills, but they didn't say who the design was.
It's a weapon. You know, you get a paper cut. If it's a really new bill.
Yeah, this is nice. Stop an Orkins truck.
Yeah, there you go. You can have lemon juice along with you. Okay, so
the plane that cannot be crossed kind of like a British moat.
Yes, a very big moat.
A very big moat.
I love it. Which it kind of reminds you too a little bit of other Elvish kingdoms. Think of Doriath, think of Lothlorien. And there's always that sense in which it's a guarded realm. The edge, as you cross into the boundary of this realm, your life is almost forfeit, right? I mean, in Lothlorien, thankfully they had elves along.
Yeah.
You know, because they what did the guy say? I can't remember his name now, but he's one of. No, I was thinking of Galadriel's one of the Elvish lieutenant. He basically said, "Our orders are to kill on sight any living being, you know, not animals, but basically anything that crosses over this river."
Yeah.
Yeah, and they heard Legolas singing, and that's why they didn't.
Yes.
Because he was singing about the falls and the water.
Now, you've just been reading.
So that was the password.
Yeah, you've been reading about you've been reading through the Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
What book are you on right now, Zach?
I just
rereading it
just finished. It's the meeting of Saruman and Gandalf and Theoden
in the Two Towers.
In the Two Towers, and they Wormtongue just threw the Palantir at them. So that's where I just finished.
So you've read the you would have
Lothlorien,
yeah, you read that Lothlorien section
recently.
Yeah. So that struck me a little bit. Just similarity.
Yeah.
Or Doriath, you know, I mean, that was one of the things that Melian, encircling it with the borders of Doriath, Thingol's realm, with enchantments, so that no one may cross that. The girdle of Melian, right? That belt, that protection. And of course, Beren comes through, but he was meant to.
Yeah. It almost seems like the protection is kind of magical, but not, because they're having to shoot the birds and the crawling animals. So like, there's a risk of them being discovered. So
yeah,
I always thought it was more magical barrier. Or maybe I was just mistaken in my.
Maybe it's more of an alert system.
Yeah.
Alert the guards that there's something trying to cross.
Yeah.
Target practice.
Yeah.
Well,
got to keep their skills sharp.
It seems as if
Jeremiah has some comments.
Yeah, go ahead, read those.
He says, classic Tolkien. Someone with higher knowledge offers advice and it is resoundingly ignored.
Yes.
He says, with reference to Tyrion ignoring Tor's message from Olmo.
Yeah.
Ouch. So true. I mean, Turgon doesn't strike me as arrogant as Thingol, but he's still very much like, I'm the boss of
Who's
Gondolin.
this young, impudent newbie who's coming into my realm and telling me what to do?
This short-lived child that
Yes.
will die soon.
That's right.
But I'll marry him to my daughter.
Yeah, well, and Ulmo sends him, and I don't know, I mean, Ulmo is interesting because we know that Ulmo was involved in ways that the other Valar was like, you know, they're not going to be as involved. But he's not the one who's typically, you know, that they would be thinking, oh, we're going to hear a message from Ulmo.
Well, he's kind of meddling.
He is.
And if he hadn't been sent, then the battlements wouldn't have been nearly as...
Which, yeah, as we see, will give time for people to escape.
Yes.
Wow.
Isn't there like I'm trying to remember from the Silmarillion that when the Númenóreans, or not Númenóreans, the Noldorian, the elves left, they kind of had this disagreement with the Valar.
Yes.
And so maybe there's some
talking
part
about
of that.
Sons of Fëanor?
Yeah.
Sons of Fëanor, all of that people, they kind of had that. They kind of had this kind of disagreement, and I think there might be some basis in that in Turgon's decision.
Well, Fëanor was kind of the ringleader, and
Yeah.
everybody was following his lead, and he was basically an arrogant.
Well, I think their arrogance is not just in Fëanor, but it's all of his people and his following, and that's where Turgon comes from.
He's kind of the poster child.
Yeah, he's the poster child. I agree, he's the poster child, but I think there's still there's part of that in Turgon's decision of
How dare you tell me what?
Yeah,
to do?
dare me what to, like when he ignores this warning from Olmo.
Well, I think
there's
that's
part
kind
of
of
it.
a human thing too.
It's a king thing.
Yeah.
It's a power thing.
It's
Yeah.
a power
If
thing.
people have authority, they don't like other people to tell them
Yeah.
how to do their job.
Well, so interesting too, because remember that Turgon is a son of Fingolfin, who is a half brother of Fëanor, and that part of Turgon's reasoning is, why should I get involved in the affairs of the sons of Fëanor? Because he saw that trouble came often from it, because you get drawn into the oath, and the doom, right? Because the doom
the oath brings the doom.
right, exactly.
The fate.
So right, so whereas Fingolfin's line, which is Turgon is his son, is, it's like, okay, well, if we can stay clear of Fëanor's sons and their oath, then by all means, let's do that.
Originally, the purpose of Gunnelan was a kind of a base camp to prepare for the final battle, and then they kind of got forgot and trapped into the domestic life, and they decided they didn't want to get involved in this final battle.
Your comment about the magic and the protection, Zach, I think it seems from the older version that the gate was protected by enchantments. That the encircling mountains to some extent, but they still had to watch them, so it was like it could be overcome.
But anything came over the mountains. It wasn't the enchantment that protected.
Yeah,
them.
They were high, and there was kind of a don't look here kind of spell.
I also think it's worthwhile to mention that the infant Eärendil is, the fact that he's not really a player in this whole
He's 1 year old
drama, right? But it's about him being protected. It's a little bit reminiscent of, say, the biblical story of say, Herod the Great trying to extinguish the children of Bethlehem, where you have, Jesus escapes. You have Eärendil, who's kind of the child of promise here, from an elvish point of view, and so it's interesting because. And this is the first marriage of man and elf. So this is like the hope, as it were, of both the elves and men are in Eärendil.
Like Spock. Oh, sorry.
Half Vulcan, half. Yeah.
How
Okay.
dare you invoke the half Vulcan?
Be logical. Yes. So shall we continue on?
Apparently not.
Try and swipe to unlock the Kindle. Thank you.
I'm also thinking about the Gauls sacking Rome, and kind of these white white gleaming fields of wheat, and no people are watching this advance.
Yeah. Well,
and Rome was completely impregnable in one sense.
It is that it does have some of the overtones, doesn't it, of those great cities of ancient times where they were sacked and overthrown, and the horror, like the news of it spreads far and wide, and oh no, Gondolin is overthrown, and this is one of the three great tales Tolkien considered of the elves. All right, so did you get to I would not resist, right? And Tuor answered, "There is reason in thy fear, for neither is my heart good towards Meglin, yet is he the nephew of the king, and thine own cousin. Nor is there charge against him, and I see naught to do but to abide and to watch." But Idril said, "This is my rede thereto. Gather thou in deep secret those delvers and quarrymen, who by careful trial are found to hold least love for Meglin, by reason of the pride and arrogance of his dealings among them. From these thou must choose trusty men to keep watch upon Meglin, whenso he fares to the outer hills. Yet I counsel thee to set the greater part of those in whose secrecy thou canst confide at a hidden delving, and to devise with their aid, howsoever cautious and slow that labor be, a secret way from thy house here beneath the rocks of this hill unto the vale below, Now this way must not lead toward the way of escape, for my heart bids me trust it not, but even to that far distant past, the cleft of the eagles in the southern mountains. And the further this delving reached thitherward beneath the plain, so much the better would I esteem it. Yet let all this labor be kept dark, save for a few. Now there are none such delvers of earth or rock as the Noldoli, and this Melko knows. But in those places is the earth of great hardness. And Tuor said, The rocks of the hill of Amangwarth are as iron, and only with much travail may they be cloven. Yet, if this be done in secret, then must great time and patience be added. But the stone of the floor of the Vale of Tumladen is as forged steel, nor may it be hewn without the knowledge of the Gondothlim, save in moons and years. Idril said then, Sooth this may be, but such is my rede, and there is yet time to spare. Then Tuor said that he might not see all its purport, but better is any plan than a lack of counsel, and I will do even as thou sayest. Now it so chanced that not long after Meglin went to the hills for the getting of ore, and straying in the mountains alone, was taken by some of the orcs prowling there, and they would do him evil and terrible hurt, knowing him to be a man of the Gondothlim. This was, however, unknown of Tuor's watchers. But evil came into the heart of Meglin, and he said to his captors, Know then that I am Meglin, son of Eol, who had to wife Isfin, sister of Turgon, king of the Gondothlim. But they said, What is that to us? And Meglin answered, Much is that to you, for if you slay me, be it speedy or slow, ye will lose great tidings concerning the city of Gondolin, that your master would rejoice to hear. Then the orcs stayed their hands, and said they would give him life if the matters he opened to them seemed to merit that. And Meglin told them of all the fashion of that plain and city, of its walls, and their height and thickness, and the valor of its gates, of the host of men-at-arms who now obeyed Turgon, he spoke, and the countless horde of weapons gathered for their equipment, of the engines of war, and the venomous fires. Then the orcs were wroth, and having heard these matters, were yet for slaying him there and then, as one who impudently enlarged the power of his miserable folk to the mockery of the great might and puissance of Melko. But Meglin, catching at a straw, said, Think ye not that ye would rather pleasure your master if ye bore to his feet so noble a captive, that he might hear my tidings of himself, and judge of their verity? Now this seemed good to the orcs, and they returned from the mountains about Gondolin to the hills of iron and the dark halls of Melko. Thither they hailed Meglin with them, and now was he in sore dread. But when he knelt before the black throne of Melko, in terror of the grimness of the shapes about him, of the wolves that sat beneath that chair, and of the adders that twined about its legs, Melko bade him speak. Then told he these tidings, and Melko, hearkening, spoke very fair to him, that the insolence of his heart in great measure returned. Now the end of this was that Melko, aided by the cunning of Meglin, devised a plan for the overthrow of Gondolin. For this Meglin's reward was to be a great captaincy among the orcs. Yet Melko purposed not in his heart to fulfill such a promise, but Tuor and Eärendil should Melko burn, and Idril be given to Meglin's arms. And with such promises was that evil one fain to redeem. Yet as meed of treachery did Melko threaten Meglin with the torment of the Balrogs. Now these were demons with whips of flame and claws of steel, by whom he tormented those of the Noldoli who durst withstand him in anything, and the Eldar have called them Malka Rauki. But the rede that Meglin gave to Melko was that not all the host of the orcs nor the Balrogs in their fierceness might by assault or siege hope ever to overthrow the walls and gates of Gondolin, even if they availed to win unto the plain without. Therefore he counselled Melko to devise out of his sorceries a succour for his warriors in their endeavour. From the greatness of his wealth of metals and his powers of fire, he bid him make beasts like snakes and dragons of irresistible might, that should overcreep the encircling hills and lap that plain and its fair city in flame and death.
Actually, I'd like to pause and comment about the Balrogs. The fact that this is an early version of them and not the one that is derived in the movie.
Go on.
Well, the one in the movie is more firmed up, because Tolkien, when he wrote that scene, he had a better idea what a Balrog is.
Mm-hmm.
Here he's kind of playing with the term and trying to figure out what it is at the same time that he's telling it to the reader.
So more fire and less demon, if you will, or less
more prototype.
More prototype, less physically, like less horns and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. More of a fire that is demonic or some kind of creature manifesting in a fiery presence.
Well, I guess he's not thinking of it as a Maiar yet. He's thinking of it as some minion of Melkor that is a strong soldier.
Although, didn't he, and I'm not sure if this is in the Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion, but it talks about how they're shadow and flame.
That's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So there is the sense in which there's also shadow, so it is a sense of cloaked, but when it's revealed, then it's dreadful to behold. So something intelligent.
The concept that the orcs initially think that he's telling them a big fish story.
Yeah.
That's the whole Michael Martinez debate about do Balrogs have wings thing.
Oh.
Shadow and flame and all of that. There's multiple articles on that.
Interesting.
Debated topic.
I'll have to look it up.
I'm a little behind the loop here, so I'm trying
That's
to fix
okay.
the audio. But,
Sure.
Okay, so the orcs, they think he's bragging.
Yeah.
They're gonna kill him on the spot.
They think the armaments aren't nearly what they are, and he's telling the truth.
Yeah, he is. And what's crazy in this scene is that it's, number one, he shows how Meglin is very, very clever. He's super, he's thinking and plotting about how he can save his own skin and get more besides. And the fact that he would actually suggest to Morgoth, here's how you can overcome it. Using these in this early version, kind of saying, well, you can make your serpents into strong, and almost as if Meglin is the like dragons are his brainchild, which is very, very different from anything later.
Another thing that crosses my mind is you get the trope of a prince of the defenders is willing to betray everyone so that he can get someone else's wife.
Yeah, that's around the whole world. I mean, even in Bollywood movies, you'll see that sometimes. So,
where were we?
Then Meglin was bidden fair home.
Then Meglin was bidden fair home, lest his absence men suspect somewhat. Technically, that would be elves, wouldn't it? But Melko wove about him the spell of bottomless dread, and he had thereafter neither joy nor quiet in his heart. Nonetheless, he wore a fair mask of good liking and gaiety, so that men said Meglin is softened, and he was held in less disfavor. Yet Idril feared him the more. Now Meglin said, I have labored much, and am minded to rest, and to join in the dance and song of the merrymakings of the folk. And he went no more quarrying stone or ore in the hills. Yet in sooth he sought herein to drown his fear and disquiet.
His conscience.
A dread possessed him that Melko was ever at hand, and this came of the spell. And he durst never again wander amid the mines, lest he again fall into the hands of orcs and be bidden once more to the terrors of the halls of darkness. Now the years fare by, and egged by Idril, Tur keepeth ever his secret dwelling. But seeing that the leaguer of spies hath grown thinner, Torgun dwelleth more at ease and in less fear. Yet these years are filled by Melko in the utmost ferment of labor, and all the thrall folk of the Nodoli must dig unceasingly for metals while Melko sitteth and desiveth fires and calleth flames and smokes to come from the lower heats. Nor doth he suffer any of the Noldali to stray ever a foot from their places of bondage. Then on a time Melko assembled all his most cunning smiths and sorcerers, and of iron and flame they wrought a host of monsters, such as has only at that time been seen, and shall not again be till the great end.
Much like the tanks.
Some were so cunningly linked that they might flow like slow rivers of metal, coil themselves around and above all obstacles before them, and these were filled in their innermost depths with the grimness of the orcs with scimitars and spears. So he sees.
Sorry.
Ow.
Hark, did I hear a dragon then?
Maybe a mechanical.
Right.
Let's see. Others of bronze and copper were given hearts and spirits of blazing fire, and they blasted all that stood before them with the terror of their snorting and trampling whatsoever escaped the ardor of their breath. Yet others were creatures of pure flame that writhed like ropes of molten metal, and they brought to ruin whatever fabric they came nigh. And iron and stone melted before them and became as water, and upon them rode the Balrogs in hundreds. And these were the most dire of all those monsters which Melko devised against Gondolin.
Wow, this is quite the land army that he's assembling.
Well, back to the numbers of the Balrogs, he's thinking of them as like a super orc, I think.
Yeah.
And he's not really thinking of them as that thing
And
Gandalf faced on the bridge.
Jeremiah says about Balrogs, I think it's also worth considering that we don't have any reason to think that all Balrogs are equal. There are differences in dragons, for example.
Yeah, magnitudes. Yeah.
Right, but they've
Yes.
he has since
Fire
specifically
lizards.
equated them with the lesser spirits.
Right. Well, but so are the Astari, the wizards, and they're smaller in form. But it's interesting. You're right. We don't see. Although maybe this is because by the time of the Lord of the Rings, you're in the Third Age, and the only Balrogs you have are, well, it's like the biggest fish has eaten up all the smaller ones in the pond. I mean, it's kind of like this whole thing where a lot of them, obviously, these hundreds that are.
Well, the also thing
perished.
was in one of his letters, he talked about how he regretted that he had the elves have a high body count of the Balrogs, and I think at the time he wrote that, he was thinking of the Balrogs more as ward riders.
Well, I think it's somewhere in between. I mean, Gothmog, which we meet later, he's a lieutenant of. I mean, he's like an archbalrog, as it were.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's what we're meeting in Moria. We're meeting an arch.
Yeah, because it's
Is that
powerful.
Is that a
It's beautiful.
Balrog that just arches his eyebrow?
It has.
One that, so maybe I'm just speculating here. Maybe Gandalf has seen normal Balrogs previously, and he's never seen one as big and as powerful.
Well,
as...
the other problem was for the Balrog to win, all he had to do was accidentally kill Frodo, whereas Gandalf had to worry about Frodo.
Right.
Yeah, well, and he met his match. I mean, there's no joke there that when
Yeah.
Gandalf meets the Balrog,
They both die.
they both die.
Gandalf
Mhm.
dies.
Yeah.
In that meeting.
Sure.
Exactly.
He's brought back.
But
so-
he's got a spare eye, so it's okay.
Well, yeah, the Valar send him back. But so any other comments about these monsters and we talked about this before? Tolkien's experience of World War I in the trenches and the technology. I mean, war has become so highly mechanized. It's the first industrialized mechanized war, and so certainly you can see him kind of seeing all this.
Well, the
flamethrowers of
Saving
World War I.
Private Ryan.
Yeah.
They had a
There you
scene
go.
where they're in the rubble of a city and some Tiger tanks are coming and the rubble's bouncing.
Yeah.
And you're getting that deep vibration transmitted
Yes.
through the ground.
Yes.
So when I saw Der Ring des Nibelungen back in the 90s on the stage of the Seattle Opera, it was this giant mechanical fire-breathing apparatus instead of some artsy-fartsy thing, and it was very compelling, and this is kind of starting to see some of the same imagery.
Do you want to take another turn? Are you
No,
I would, I'm willing to pass it on.
okay? So, do you want
Okay.
to read some more, Chris? We're at now when the seventh summer had gone.
Okay. Where are we?
Now, when
At the
seventh
very top.
summer-
Now, when the seventh summer had gone, since the treason of Meglin and Arundel was yet a very tender years, through a valorous child, Melko withdrew all his spies. For every path and corner of the mountains was now known to him. Yet the Gondolithim thought in their unawares that Melko would no longer seek against them, perceiving their might and the impregnable strength of their dwelling. But Idril fell into a dark mood, and the light of her face was clouded, and many wondered thereat. Yet Turgon reduced the watch and ward to its ancient numbers. Backsliding.
Yeah.
Well,
And
the enemy has seen our might and fears us so
Right.
greatly that we can.
Yeah.
and somewhat less as autumn came and the gathering of fruits and they have to go harvest. That's right. That's why they have to reduce over folk.
Farmers got fun.
Yeah, farmer Giles.
Only if you want to eat.
Yeah.
Um,
And is Otto king?
the gathering of fruits was over. Folk turned with glad hearts to the feasts of winter, but Tuor stood upon the battlements and gazed upon the encircling hills. Now behold, Idril stood beside him, and the wind was in her hair, and Tuor thought that she was exceedingly beautiful and stopped to kiss her. But her face was sad, and she said, "Now come the days when thou must make choice." And Tuor knew not what she said. Then, drawing him within their halls, she said to him how her heart misgave her for fear concerning Arundel their son, and foreboding that some great evil was nigh, and that Melko would be at the bottom of it. Then Tuor would comfort her, but might not, and she questioned him concerning the secret delving, and he said how it now led a league into the plain, and that was her heart somewhat lightened. But still she counseled that the delving be pressed on, and that henceforth should speed way more than secrecy, because now is the time very near. And another reed
means counsel, by the way, or wisdom.
Yes, she gave him, and this he took also, that certain of the bravest and most true among the lords and warriors of the Gondolithum be chosen with care, and told that of that secret way and its issue. Then she counseled him to make into a stout guard, and to give them his emblem to wear, that they become his folk, and to do this under pretext of the right and dignity of a great lord, kinsman to the king. Moreover, said she, I will get my father's favor to that. In secret she whispered to folk that if the city came to its last stand, or Turgon be slain, that they rally about Tuor and her son, and to this they laughed a yea, saying, however, that Gondolin would stand as long as Tenqueto or the mountains of Valinor.
To rally around her, because Tuor is her husband, but he's a man, and she's the king's daughter,
Mortal.
right? But I wonder if Tolkien there is thinking that Idril is saying, I might not make it out, but it's my son I'm thinking of. To preserve her son was more important to her than anything else. I don't know.
Isn't that kind of a consequence of having kids? Your children become more important.
Yeah, and I think the fact that she knows that I can't remember what has been said beforehand, but we know that Arundel there's something in prophecies or whatever regarding him that he will bring about. Ready for me to read next?
Sure.
Yet to Turgon she spoke not openly, nor suffered Tuor to do so, as he desired, despite their love and reverence for him. A great and a noble and a glorious king he was, seeing that he trusted in Meglin, and held with blind obstinacy his belief in the impregnable might of the city, and that Melko sought no more against it, perceiving no hope therein. Now in this he was ever strengthened by the cunning sayings of Meglin. Behold, the guile of that gnome was very great, for he wrought much in the dark, so that folk said, He doth well to bear the sign of the sable mole, and by reason of the folly of certain of the quarrymen, and yet more by reason of the loose words of certain among his kin to whom word was somewhat unwarily spoken by Tuor, he gathered a knowledge of the secret work, and laid against that a plan of his own. So winter deepened, and it was very cold for those regions, so that frost fared about the plain of Tumladen, and ice lay on its pools. Yet the fountains played ever on Amon-Goreth, and the 2 trees blossomed. Oh. So that actually seems to indicate that Tolkien is saying here they weren't metal trees.
He could have changed his mind.
Well, clearly.
Because, I mean, this is one of the revisions.
Yes, it is.
So
I thought this was the earlier one.
It's an earlier
It's an earlier one, exactly.
But it's not the first one. So maybe he actually was at one point
Went
thinking
back and
that they
forth.
were descended from Galathilion. I'm thinking that there would have been some seedling or some trees that were crafted. Let's see.
Maybe it was a magical simulation like Gadriel had done with Lothlorien.
Maybe. And the 2 trees blossomed, and folk made merry till the day of terror that was hidden in the heart of Melko. And it's interesting that they do blossom in the winter, which is, again, very different. Like
Right, but that's
Lothlorien.
not beyond the... I guess what I was trying to point out, that's not beyond the magical skills of the elves.
Oh, of course. And I'm agreeing with you, actually. Yeah. Because Galadriel, in Lothlorien, it's like time stands still. And so, yeah.
Well, I got the impression, and the movie's reinforcement, that Lothlorien was made to look like the world before the sun was around. So it was always twilight or night, and the stars were always out in Lothlorien.
Well, I'd have to look up the sources on that. In these ways, that bitter winter passed, and the snows lay deeper than ever before on the encircling hills. Yet in its time a spring of wondrous glory melted the skirts of those white mantles, and the valley drank the waters and burst into flowers. So came and passed with revelry of children the festival of Nost na Lothion, or the birth of flowers. And the hearts of the Gondathlim were uplifted for the good promise of the year. And now at length is that great feast, Tarnin Austa, or the gates of summer, near at hand. For know that on a night it was their custom to begin a solemn ceremony at midnight, continuing it even till the dawn of Tarnin Austa broke, and no voice was uttered in the city from midnight till the break of day, but the dawn they hailed with ancient songs. For years uncounted had the coming of summer thus been greeted with music of choirs, standing upon their gleaming eastern wall, and now comes even the night of vigil, and the city is filled with silver lamps, while in the groves upon the new-leaved trees lights of jeweled colors swing, and low musics go along the ways, but no voice sings until the dawn. Gives you almost a feeling of Christmas, or in spring, like festivities and lanterns and lights. And
I think he was probably thinking more of the spring equinox ceremonies. In the culture.
Oh, of course. But the visual impact, this is a celebratory time, and it's colorful, and but it's interesting how he uses the present tense as if this is going on right now. Should I read some more, or did you want to?
No, I'm good.
The sun has sunk beyond the hills, and folk array them for the festival very gladly and eagerly, glancing in expectation to the east. Lo, even when she had gone and all was dark, lights and then marveled, and there was a thronging of the walls and battlements. Then wonder grew to doubt as the light waxed and became yet redder, and doubt to dread as men saw the snow upon the mountains dyed as it were with blood. And thus it was that the fire serpents of Melko came upon Gondolin. Then came over the plain riders who bore breathless tidings from those who kept vigil on the peaks, and they told of the fiery hosts and the shapes like dragons, and said, Melko was upon us! Great was the fear and anguish within that beauteous city, and the streets and byways were filled with the weeping of women and the wailing of children, and the squares with the mustering of soldiers and the ring of arms. There were the gleaming banners of all the great houses and kindreds of the Gondathlim. Mighty was the array of the house of the king, and their colors were white and gold and red, and their emblems the moon and the sun and the scarlet heart. Now in the midmost of these stood Tuor above all heads, and his mail of silver gleamed, and about him was a press of the stoutest of the folk.
I was wanting to point out the image of the attack coming over the horizon. To me, that speaks of World War II, where you would see the flashes of artillery fire, beyond from where you were, and you could see a battle from far away, which was kind of a new thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is interesting. I'm just looking at the words, how this reads in the Silmarillion of the chapter of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin, and it says, but the red light mounted the hills in the north and not in the east, and there was no stay in the advance of the foe until they were beneath the very walls of Gondolin, and the city was beleaguered without hope. Of the deeds of desperate valor there done by the chieftains of the noble houses and their warriors, and not least by Tuor, much is told in The Fall of Gondolin. Of the battle of Ecthelion, of the fountain with Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, in the very square of the king, where each slew the other. So it's describing, like saying that there's more to read elsewhere.
Well, it's more
and are they not written?
A work that,
and all the deeds that were done, are they not written in the book of?
Yes, the Annals of the Kings.
Yes.
Now in the midmost of these stood Tuor above all heads, and his mail of silver gleamed, and about him was a press of the stoutest of the folk. Lo, all these wore wings, as it were, of swans or gulls upon their helms, and the emblem of the white wing was upon their shields. But the folk of Meglin were drawn up in the same place, and sable was their harness, and they bore no sign or emblem, but their round caps of steel were covered with moleskin, and they fought with axes, two-headed, like mattocks. There Meglin, prince of Gondobar, gathered many warriors of dark countenance, and lowering gaze about him, and a ruddy glow shone upon their faces and gleamed about the polished surfaces of their accoutrement. Behold, all the hills to the north were ablaze, and it was as if rivers of fire ran down the slopes that led to the plain of Tunladen, and folk might already feel the heat thereof. And many other kindreds were there, the folk of the Swallow and the Heavenly Arch, and from these folk came the greatest number and the best of the bowmen, and they were arrayed upon the broad places of the walls. Now the folk of the Swallow bore a fan of feathers on their helms, and they were arrayed in white and dark blue, and in purple and black, and showed an arrowhead on their shields. Their lord was Dwelin, swiftest of all men to run and leap, and surest of archers at a mark. But they of the Heavenly Arch, being a folk of uncounted wealth, were arrayed in a glory of colours, and their arms were set with jewels that flamed in the light now over the sky. Every shield of that battalion was of the blue of the heavens, and its boss a jewel built of 7 gems, rubies and amethysts and sapphires, emeralds, chrysoprase, topaz, and amber, but an opal of great size was set in their helms. Egelmoth was their chieftain, and wore a blue mantle upon which the stars were broidered in crystal, and his sword was bent. Now none else of the Noldoli bore curved swords, yet he trusted rather to the bow, and shot therewith further than any among that host.
Even the elves have class distinctions. I kind of read that as a class of the elves that are getting their wealth at the expense of the others.
I don't think there was too much Marxism in the elves, is there?
There too were the folk of the Pillar and the Tower of Snow, and both these kindreds were marshalled by Penlod, tallest of the gnomes. There were those of the Tree, and they were a great house, and their raiment was green. And they fought with iron-studded clubs or with slings, and their lord Galdor was held the most valiant of all the Gondolithum, save Torgon alone. There stood the house of the Golden Flower, who bore a raged sun upon their shield, and their chief Gorfindel bore a mantle so broidened in threads of gold that it was diapered?
That means diamond pattern. So the original meaning of diaper is diamond checked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not the image that comes to my mind. Where was I? Oh,
with
Celandine as a field in spring, and his arms were damasked with cunning gold. Then came there from the south of the city the people of the fountain with Ecthelion, right, everything's okay, was their lord, and silver with diamonds were their delight, and swords very long and bright and pale did they wield, and they went into battle to the music of flutes. Behind them came the host of the harp, and this was a battalion of brave warriors, but the leader Saliant was a craven, and he fawned upon Meglin. and they were dight with tassels of silver and tassels of gold, and a harp of silver shone in their blazonry upon a field of black. But Saligent bore one of gold, and he alone rode into battle of all the sons of Gondolithum, and he was heavy and squat. Now the last of the battalions was furnished by the folk of the Hammer of Wrath, and of these came many of the best smiths and craftsmen, and all that kindred reverenced Aule, the smith, more than any other of the Anur. They fought with great maces like hammers, and their shields were heavy, for their arms were very strong. In older days they had been much recruited by the Nolde, who escaped from the mines of Melkor, and the hatred of this house for the works of that evil one and the Balrogs his demons was exceedingly great. Now their leader was Rog, strongest of the gnomes, scarce second in valor to that of Galdor of the Tree. The sign of this people was the stricken anvil, and a hammer and smith, if the sparks around it was set on their shields, and the red, gold, and black iron was their delight. Very numerous was that battalion, nor had any amongst them a faint heart, and they won the greatest glory of all those fair houses in that struggle against doom. Yet were they ill-fated, and none of them ever fared away from that field, but fell about rogue and vanished from the earth, and with them much craftsmanship and skill has vanished forever. So
you feel like, I mean, again, I don't want to over stress the parallel with World War One. I mean, obviously, this is, a fantastical creation and story, but just thinking about how, you would have, wouldn't you, various battalions and regiments and groupings of various kinds. I think of the Scots, the Coldstream Guard, and
their kilts, yes,
in their kilts,
yes.
and even on the fields of World War One, you can hear the piping, and you've got others, your maybe regular British soldiers or whatever that go on their English ones, and all this is going on, and then a portion comes back, but it's like whole regiments, not regiments, but whole battalions or whole sections are completely wiped out by particularly like the Somme. I'm thinking of, he did live through the Somme, so it's just that'd be very hard.
Should we take a break and read one of his letters?
Shall we stop until next time?
I guess it is.
They're right up to the point where it's about to start the battle, but they haven't yet.
So you want to go to letters next?
I think that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna. What page are we ending on? Let's get this down.
Copy.
76.
Whereabouts on page 76? This was the fashion.
Yes, 76. First available paragraph.
Yeah.
I didn't plan it that way. It was purely random.
No, it's a good spot to stop.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you though for reading so much. Thank you for reading. For us to go. I think that's really good.
Okay. We have to be careful that we interject a lot, or it becomes beyond fair use.
True that.
So that's the trade-off of doing that.
I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. You've been pretty quiet, helping us with the tech.
I've been trying to fix the audio and such. Yeah, just trying to get them to, because they're all different quality and caliber, and trying to get the audio quality to match better has been problematic.
Right,
so.
right.
Were any of them Excalibur?
Somebody hand me a sword of great worth that I might thrust
maybe
it
one of
through
them
this
was
man.
once named Cal and is no more, and has been put into the cold. All right, so we were at 156. It looks like we'd come to 156 maybe, because I had a card in here, which that's 156, and this is. I think is this the long? This is a long one.
Ooh, you want to save that for next time too?
Well, we've got 20 minutes.
We do.
Yeah, so we can do it. So it's to...
It's a Jesuit. Robert Murray S.J. That'd be Society of Jesuits.
Okay.
So it's a Catholic priest.
Yes. So...
I don't remember the Jesuits as being nice people.
So
What?
we can keep that probably to our own opinions.
It
right
depends
now.
on the time period in history. But
Jesuits and Jesuits. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
it depends
Yeah.
on the time period in history. Yes.
folks down at GU are great. And over in Seattle are great.
Okay, I guess those aren't the ones that are sticking in my mind.
Okay, so
Yeah, I mean, maybe like
Better
the
ones.
Franciscans and Dominicans and such, like during the Tokugawa era and such. That was
Yeah.
ooh. There was some nastiness going on there.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let me mute that because it's looping through too much. I can. Okay, good. All right. I'll just trying to get it balanced between enough and too much, and it is really being a problem. All right. 156 to Robert Murray, S.J., a draft. An answer to further comments on The Lord of the Rings. 4th of November, 1954, 76 Sandfield Road, Headington, Oxford. My dear Rob, it is remarkably kind of you to write at such length amid, I fear, weariness. I am answering at once because I am grateful and because only letters that I do treat so ever get answered. And most of all, because your parcel has arrived when having done all my prep, ordering all the minutes and resolutions of a long and argumentative college meeting yesterday, there being no fellow of ill will and only 24 persons of the usual human absurdity. I felt rather like an observer at the meeting of Hobbit notables to advise the mayor on the precedence and choice of dishes at a shire banquet. I have half an hour to spare before going downhill for a session with the college secretary. That is the kind of sentence I naturally write, because it was filled with commas and parentheses and hyphens and periods within the parentheses. It was just all over.
Kind of like footnoting an academic paper.
Yeah. No, Smeagol was not, of course, fully envisaged at first, but I believe his character was implicit and merely needed attention. As for Gandalf, surely it is not to join PH, footnote 1, to voice any criticism. I could be much more destructive myself. There are, I suppose, always defects in any large-scale work of art, and especially in those of literary form that are founded on an earlier matter which is put to new use, like Homer, or Beowulf, or Virgil, or Greek or Shakespearean tragedy. In which class, as a class not as a competitor, The Lord of the Rings really falls though it is only founded on the author's own first draft. I think the way in which Gandalf's return is presented is a defect, and one other critic, as much under the spell as yourself, curiously used the same expression, cheating.
Huh.
That is partly due to the ever-present compulsion of narrative technique. He must return at that point, and such explanations of his survival as are explicitly set out must be given there. But the narrative is urgent, and must not be held up for elaborate discussions involving the whole mythological setting. It is a little impeded even so, though I have severely cut G's account of himself. I might perhaps have made more clear the later remarks in Volumes 2 and Volumes 3, which refer to or are made by Gandalf, but I have purposely kept all allusions to the highest matters down to mere hints, perceptible only by the most attentive, or kept them under unexplained symbolic forms. So God and the angelic gods, the lords or powers of the West, only peep through in such places as Gandalf's conversation with Frodo. Behind that there was something else at work, beyond any design of the ring-makers, or in Faramir's Númenórean grace at dinner.
PH is Peter Hastings' letter 153.
Okay.
The draft.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to go with Gandalf really?
Gandalf really died.
That's just what you said. Gandalf died.
And I was right.
Spoilers!
Gandalf
Spoiler
really died and was changed. For that seems to me the only real cheating to represent anything that can be called death as making no difference. I am G the White, who has returned from death. Probably he should rather have said to Wormtongue, I have not passed through death, not fire and flood, to bandy crooked words with a serving man.
Didn't he adopt that in the final version?
He used the fire and flood, not death.
Yeah.
I think.
And so on. I might say much more, but it would only be in perhaps tedious elucidation of the mythological ideas in my mind. It would not, I fear, get rid of the fact that the return of G is, as presented in his book, a defect, and one I was aware of, and probably did not work hard enough to mend. But G is not, of course, a human being, man or hobbit. It would only be in... There are naturally no precise modern terms to say what he was. I would venture to say that he was an incarnate angel, strictly a...
Angelos.
Okay, Angelos.
That's great.
That is, with the other Istari, wizards, those who know, an emissary from the Lords of the West sent to Middle-earth as the great crisis of Sauron loomed on the horizon. By incarnate, I mean that they were embodied in physical bodies capable of pain and weariness, and of afflicting the spirit with physical fear, and of being, quote, killed, unquote, that though supported by the angelic spirit that might endure long, and only show slowly the weaning and care of labor. Why they should take such a form, pardon me, why they should take such a form is bound up with the mythology of the angelic powers of the world of this fable. At the point when this fabulous history, the purpose was precisely to limit and hinder their exhibition of power on the physical plane, and so that they should do what they were primarily sent for: train, advise, instruct, arouse the hearts and minds of those threatened by Sauron to a resistance. Resistance is futile. Resistance with their own strength, and not just to do the job for him. They thus appeared as old sage figures, but in this mythology, all the angelic powers concerned with the world were capable of many degrees of error and failing, between the absolute satanic rebellion and evil of Morgoth and his satellite Sauron, and the failance of some of the other higher powers of gods. The wizards are not exempt. Indeed, being incarnate, were more likely to stray or err. Gandalf alone fully passes the tests on a moral plane anyway. He makes mistakes of judgment. For in his condition, it was for him a sacrifice to perish on the bridge in defense of his companions, less perhaps than of a mortal man or hobbit, since he was far greater, had a far greater inner power than they, but also more, since it was a humbling and abnegation of himself in conformity to the rules. For all he could know at that moment was the only person who could direct the resistance to Sauron successfully, and his mission was in vain. He was handing over the authority, capital A, that ordained the rules, and giving up personal hope of success.
Any comments for the notes on this first section? Talks about Smeagol, and then most of this is about Gandalf.
Yeah. He did die.
That's really interesting. That whole idea of the fact that in some ways it was easier for him to die because he knew what would happen to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wasn't.
Or did he?
What I mean is, knowing that he came as a spirit that then was embodied.
Yes.
He could go back to being a spirit but that it was also harder because he would no longer be playing the main role in directing things.
His task would be kind of unfinished.
Yeah. Well, isn't it kind of like most of those creatures, like the Maiar, they all started out as spirits.
Yep.
From like the very beginning of the Silmarillion.
Sure.
And then they chose to take on
a
little bit more form.
Yeah, more form.
Yep.
I mean, even
bound to Arda.
Even when Saruman is killed by Wormtongue in the end, that his spirit is like he's described as a cloud, and then the wind blows him away.
Yeah,
so he's still,
which is not dissimilar to what happened to Sauron as well.
Sauron, yeah. I think all of them have that. That's where he's describing is they're physically dead, but they're still spiritually around.
Yeah, they are.
The other thing that strikes me is that the more incarnate they are, the more rules they have to follow.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good.
Yeah, because Sauron
was
he was a shapeshifter originally. He could change his shape, and then when he died after Numenor, or
you mean Sauron?
Sauron, yeah. When he died, he became less.
Yeah.
Well, after Isildur killed his second form,
Isildur.
Well, he cut the ring from.
Yeah, Isildur. There's an L in there.
Isildur. Yeah.
What about him?
He had, in some ways, in the Third Age, he has more influence than he had in the Second Age. He's more omnipresent than he was in the Second Age.
Right. Well, let's carry on reading. That, I should say, is what the Authority wished as a set-off to Saruman. Notice the capital A there. The wizards, as such, had failed, or if you like, the crisis had become too grave and needed an enhancement of power. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced, and returned. Yes, that was the name. I was Gandalf. Of course, he remains similar in personality and idiosyncrasy, but both his wisdom and power are much greater. When he speaks, he commands attention. The old Gandalf could not have dealt so with Theoden, nor with Saruman. He is still under the obligation of concealing his power and of teaching rather than enforcing or dominating wills, but where the physical powers of the enemy are too great for the good will of the opposers to be effective, he can act in emergency as an angel, no more violently than the release of St. Peter from prison. He seldom does so, operating rather through others, but in one or two cases in the war, in Volume 3, he does reveal a sudden power. He twice rescues Faramir. He alone is left to forbid the entrance of the Lord of Nazgul to Minas Tirith, when the city has been overthrown and its gates destroyed. And yet so powerful is the whole train of human resistance that he himself has kindled and organized that in fact no battle between the two occurs. It passes to other mortal hands. In the end, before he departs forever, he sums himself up. I was the enemy of Sauron. He might have added, for that purpose I was sent to Middle-earth. But by that he would at the end have meant more than at the beginning. He was sent by a mere prudent plan of the angelic Valar, or governors, but, A, authority, had taken up this plan and enlarged it at the moment of its failure. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done. Sent back by whom and whence? Not by the, quote, gods, whose business is only with this embodied world and its time, for he passed out of thought in time. Naked is, alas, unclear. It was meant just, literally, unclothed like a child, not discarnate, and so ready to receive the white robes of the highest. Galadriel's power is not divine, and his, Gandalf's, healing in Lorien is meant to be no more than physical healing and refreshment. But if it is cheating to treat death as making no difference, embodiment must not be ignored. Gandalf may be enhanced in power, that is, under the forms of this fable, in sanctity, but if still embodied, he must still suffer care and anxiety, and the needs of flesh. He has no more, if no less, certitudes or freedoms than, say, a living theologian. In any case, none of my angelic persons are represented as knowing the future completely, or indeed at all where other wills are concerned. Hence their constant temptation to do, or try to do, what is for them wrong and disastrous, to force lesser wills to power, to force lesser wills by power, by awe if not by actual fear or physical constraint. But the nature of the gods' knowledge of the history of their world, and their part in making it before it was embodied or made real, whence they drew their knowledge of the future such as they had, is part of the major mythology. It is at least there represented that the intrusion of elves and men into that story was not any part of theirs at all, but reserved. Hence elves and men were called the children of God, and hence the gods either loved or hated them specially, as having a relation to the Creator equal to their own, if of different stature. This is the mythological theological situation at this moment in history, which has been made explicit, but has not yet been published. But finally it was. Hurrah. So it is now 2:57. So I wonder if we should stop at this point.
Sure.
And have last discussions.
Yep. Go ahead.
So let me mark this spot here.
Closing discussions.
So we're at the bottom of. Well, okay. So
We
it's,
didn't finish it.
it's the second page. No.
Oh.
It's the second page up to men have fallen.
Yeah.
Stopped at that. Okay. Any comments on this section of this page of the letter?
I'm comparing biblical angels and demons with this. I'm also thinking about the whole screw tape affair with Lewis, and kind of this concept that these beings are not perfect, and that they are embodied for a specific period of time, for a specific purpose.
Well, in some ways, the body is more of an instrument,
Yeah.
an extension, an interface device for Middle Earth. Kind of shoehorn that in.
The rules. You know the rules. Yes.
That sounds like a quote from The Matrix. I knew that.
Well, Hugh. What's his name? He's in both.
Yeah, he's the
Matrix and he's Elrond, right?
Elrond and the Guardian.
Sure.
I'm just double checking to see if there's any. Anything under the
Yeah, there were.
Amazon Prime.
Oh. Yeah, there's no release date as of yet that I can see. They're working on it.
Oh, well, there is this. Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings series set to be filmed at New Scots Studio. So it's going to be in Scotland that they film it. So they've got pictures of it. Shooting will take place in Leith, Edinburgh in August to October this year.
Is that so they won't get lynched by an American audience?
Or by a Kiwi audience.
Yeah, so this is pretty much it. Yeah. Any comments from Jeremiah that we haven't read?
No. So anybody in the audience want to make any last comments before we call it a meeting for the month? This is your last chance.
Last call.
Speak now or be not heard until the next month.
Arf.
Or through email or our website, tolkienscholars.org. Here on youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars, or on Twitter @Tolkien Scholars, or email tolkienscholars@gmail.com. So I guess there are ways to be heard. And of course, check out the latest issue of Other Minds magazine at otherminds.net. Issue 20 is out currently. 21 is in the works. So definitely check that out as soon as you get the chance. If you haven't missed any issues, they're all freely available as downloadable PDFs. Jeremiah says, I think it's really nice that Amazon is filming in the UK, nothing against New Zealand. Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's where Tolkien was. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, he wanted to create a mythology for Britain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, though his crest had long since fallen.
Yes, that too. So our next meeting is May 18th, I believe.
Okay.
It's the third Saturday.
All right. Great.
Must be changed.
Jeremiah says, thanks for a great show. Until next time. So thank you for joining us. Wherever you may be well. Namarie.
Namare.
Marie.